Welcome to Hot Health, a program that brings you current information on a variety of health topics that may impact your health. Today, we have Dr. Ruth Stonheiser with special guest Dr. Winston Craig. He will be presenting on the topic, Was Israel's Diet Healthy? Right here on Smart Lifestyle TV, an LLBN network.
Dr. Craig, thank you for coming on the program tonight.
You're welcome.
Can you give me a little bit of information about your background?
Sure. I have taught university health nutrition classes for 4 decades, most of the time at Andrews University, but also at the University of Massachusetts and Loma Linda University, and have enjoyed teaching students immensely. I'm now retired, living in Walla Walla in Washington.
I understand that you're the author of a number of books.
Yeah, about 8 on health, nutrition, and herbs. They are my favorite subjects.
Well, it sounds like we may have to have you back for another hot health topic. This evening, I understand that your topic is about the diet of the ancient Israelites and whether it was healthy or not. What got you started on thinking about that topic?
Well, I enjoy reading the Old Testament, in particular the Torah. I've just been reading through Genesis and Exodus, and I'm really excited about it. And I've been a student of the Mediterranean diet, being similar to a vegetarian diet, and I thought, hey, what was it like back in ancient Israel? What were they eating? What did God give them? You know, it was a chosen people. There must be something good about their diet. So
your topic this evening is about that diet. Where did you collect the information? Obviously, you weren't alive back then.
Well, scientists always read the literature, and there are books I'll mention as we go along. One of the books particularly by Nathan MacDonald, and there are historians have written about this, and there's good information, and of course there's archaeology, and you can learn a little bit from archaeology. So we put it all together, and then we're focusing on the health value of those foods that they use. So then we use PubMed and look up, what are the nutritional and health value of these foods that they were eating.
Well, this is really intriguing. I can hardly wait to hear your presentation.
Well, let's start right away then. It really focuses on Deuteronomy 8, where God was calling the people out of Egypt, and this text that's given here that God was going to bring them into a good land where they would lack nothing. And there are a number of foods that are highlighted here in yellow that's what this lecture is going to focus on. Wheat, barley, vines, which is obviously grapes, fig trees, pomegranates, a land of olive oil, and honey. We're in a land in which you will eat bread without scarcity. So there you have it. This is not their total diet, but these are the major things that are described there. So we often think of the Palestine or Israel as a land of milk and honey. And interesting, the word milk, shalab, could actually be the word for fat, shilib. It's very similar. And the word for honey, dabash, indicates a sweet syrup made from fruit such as dates, figs, or grapes. And when we were in Jordan a few years ago, we tasted some of this, and it's very, very delicious. The expression, therefore, suggests a general sense of bounty. So a land of milk and honey could actually mean fatness and sweetness, or pleasure and plenty. So it makes a lot of sense. And if you think back in Numbers 13, this richness was exhibited by these 2 spies that came back with these huge grapes and figs and pomegranates. So this was written about as referenced here, What Did the Ancient Israelites Eat?, published in 2008. So, Nathan describes this language as very lyrical. A land that's like paradise, where people lack nothing, full of fountains and springs, and it sounds great. So when they left Egypt, of course, Egypt, like Mesopotamia, is desert-like, and so they need to irrigate, so you have vegetables. But when you go to Palestine or Israel, they relied totally on the land, on rainfall. So obviously trees and vines and grains were the basics, the necessities which they lived on, rather than melons and cucumbers and garlic and other things that you see pictured here.
The Old Testament refers a lot to the early rain and the latter rain, or the other rain.
For triggering the growth and then to ripen to finish it off. Now, we're not going to be talking in this lecture about the other foods, but we'll just mention them briefly here. Legumes, of course, peas, beans and lentils are commonly eaten there, and we all know falafels made from chickpeas, made into hummus. Almonds and pistachios were the common nuts, although they were typically eaten by more the well-to-do. And fruits, of course, had a real symbolic meaning because it didn't require any work. And so these were a gift of God. And, of course, we know the Garden of Eden was full of fruit trees. So the fruits were sort of specially considered. So coming back to that list then, we have here those 7 foods that we mentioned, that was mentioned in Deuteronomy 8: wheat, barley, olive oil, figs, grapes, pomegranates, and then honey, or the honey that they used was a syrup made from the fruits of the date palm. And if you look in archaeology, wine press or grape press and olive presses are very commonly found. And of course ovens where they bake bread. So you would expect that grapes and olives and flatbreads that they made in their ovens would be the common fare of everyday life. And so let's just talk about these 7 foods and go through them one by one and see what we can learn. Well, we know that olive oil is the foundation of the Mediterranean diet, and of course Israel is in the Levant on the east part of the Mediterranean, so you would expect that they would eat Mediterranean style eating. So olive oil would be common. Of course, extra virgin is specially identified, the cold press, and we know from the literature that this is full of phytochemicals. These are antioxidants, polyphenolics, which are very powerful. And research, the literature shows that using these old European, tyrosol and others that are mentioned here, actually help diminish the risk of blood clots. They help lower your cholesterol. They, to a measure, help lower blood pressure. And these antioxidants also protect against cancer. So you expect all through the Mediterranean, not just Israel, that heart disease and cancer you would expect to be less, because
if you follow the Mediterranean type diet.
Right. If you're eating the olive oil, it has very strong anti-inflammatory properties, and a lot of the foods that we'll be talking about actually do have strong anti-inflammatory properties. A lot of the oil-containing vessels that you find in archaeology actually have the olive plant painted or engraved, or however they put it on there. So it's sort of the cornerstone of the Mediterranean diet, and populations that consume the Mediterranean diet rich in olive oil are going to have not only less cancer and lower risk of heart disease, but also diabetes, and early dementia is also being related to using the Mediterranean diet, and overall mortality is reduced. So very similar to following a vegetarian or a plant-based diet. Mediterranean diet is very similar. So that's the first food article. The second one was barley. And because barley ripened before wheat in Palestine and was considered food for the poor, food for the animals. And if you look at the ancient map, you see that Egypt and Mesopotamia used barley perhaps a little more commonly. But in Israel, it was often used in their sacrifices. Barley was part of their sacrificial system. We know today that barley is like oatmeal, very rich in soluble fiber. The compound's called beta-glucan, and this is very useful for managing diabetes and managing weight. The soluble fiber helps in that respect. And the one thing about barley is that even when you refine it, it still has a considerable amount of fiber. So pearl barley still has, as you see on the screen, 1 serving, 3 grams of fiber compared with brown rice, which is 2 grams. So it even has more than whole grain rice. So in the experiments, they found that when they put barley flour into cookies or into crackers or even into muffins, they found that it lowered the blood glucose response, lowered the insulin response. So this is helpful for people who are pre-diabetic or who are diabetic and want to manage their blood glucose a lot better. So they've done experiments and found that the glycemic index, when you make these foods out of wheat or rice or corn, is much higher than it is when you use oatmeal or barley. So barley is good for managing your blood sugar. Okay, there are health claims that are made not only in the United States but in other countries that show that barley is useful also for lowering cholesterol because of that soluble fiber we mentioned.
Fiber, yeah.
So there have been about 50 studies, 11 of which are human studies, that have demonstrated that barley used on a regular basis lowers your bad cholesterol. So that's good news. Not only lowers your blood glucose, but also your cholesterol levels. So coming to the third food, which is wheat, and we're very familiar with wheat, but just to remind ourselves of some of the research, it's also very rich in antioxidants. The one that's fairly unique is ferulic acid. And you can see from the list here that regular use of whole wheat. Now, we're not talking about white wheat, white flour, white bread, white whatever. And my dad used to tell me the whiter the bread, the sooner you're dead. Well, there is data to show that, because whole wheat bread regularly eaten does lower your risk of heart disease, bowel cancer, stroke, diabetes, and your weight is better managed using whole grain products. So this study done in Boston with nurses, right. They showed that those that ate at least 3 servings of whole grains every day had significantly less heart disease, stroke, and diabetes. You see the numbers here, like almost 40%, 25 to 40%. In another study with men, the male health professional study, those that ate at least 1.5 ounces a day of whole grains, they had almost 20% less risk of heart disease. So eating your whole grains is good. It lowers your blood pressure also. Studies have shown that hypertension can be significantly reduced. Healthy volunteers that were given 3 servings of whole grains a day for 3 months, their systolic blood pressure was reduced by 6 points compared to those who were using refined products. So if you convert that over into risk, that means your heart disease risk is decreased 15%, and that drop in blood pressure, systolic blood pressure, means about a 25% drop in stroke. So, hey, it's worth eating whole grains if that's the sort of advantage you get.
Yeah, heart disease is still the #1 killer in the United States.
Yeah, we have to remember that. So furthermore, this report shows that it also impacts on insulin. So this is common. The foods that seem to help with heart disease also help with cancer and also help with diabetes, because they all have an undergirding inflammatory response. And these whole grains and fruits and vegetables and things we'll be discussing are all full of anti-inflammatory compounds that are very helpful. A summary of 11 cohort studies found that using whole grains was inversely associated with risk of developing colorectal cancer. So the more whole grains that you use rather than refined grains, the less risk you did of getting bowel cancer, particularly rectal more so than colon, but both will help. So again, this is significant. So now let's move to dates. There's a number of types of dates, different colours. We're familiar with some of these here, some yellow-brown, some more reddish. You can eat them fresh or you can have them dried, and as seen here, a palm tree can produce over 200 pounds of dates a year. And fortunately they don't all ripen at the same time. But they're high energy, they're full of sugar, but it's not like eating a candy bar because it does have fibre, and the fibre causes the sugars to slow down in absorption. They have very little fat, very little sodium, and they're high in potassium. And as a physician, you know that that's good for blood pressure. So these are considered to be useful for in a good diet with fruits and vegetables to manage blood pressure. And they do have some vitamins and trace minerals, but just a broad base of healthy nutrition. In the Middle East, they're very commonly used, as I mentioned earlier, for making syrup or honey. And they can be stuffed with things like nuts, almonds, walnuts, pistachios, or tahini, because tahini is very popular. And they can be used in sweet dishes and cookies, cereals. You can flavour a number of different foods. And you can also ground them and dehydrate them and make date sugar, which some of us even use now for our cooking. And the flowers and buds of the date palm can be used in a salad, so you can see lots of uses. And in the Middle East, they've traditionally been used medicinally also, because they have a high tannin content, so there's an astringency, which means they can be used for intestinal problems. They've also been used as a laxative, and some have even made syrups or pastes to use for bronchial problems or colds. So not only nutrition, but also medicinal use. Now moving to figs. Figs, of course, are a real favourite, and being in Turkey, of course, I think of figs as the symbol of Turkey. They're just so nice. You get them there in July in season. And in the Bible, they're very commonly used as a symbol of peace and fruitfulness. And the fig was often used as a metaphor for Israel. There are lots of different varieties, and usually we eat them dried. And these are also used in pastry and confectionery because they're quite sweet. They have a nutty flavour because of the seeds and so forth. They're commonly thought of as being rich in calcium and iron and dietary fibre again. So, of course, because of that and the seeds, you can think of laxation. If you don't need to worry about regular movements if you're using your figs. And these are also low in sodium and fat, so same story, high in potassium, good for blood pressure. And because of their calcium content and possibly boron also, they may also be kind of backup for helping with bones. Phytochemistry in figs is rich, and some of the compounds are associated with cancer protection. These powerful antioxidants are similar to ones found in fruits, and they are known to protect against cardiovascular disease and cancer. So the ancient Israelites, if they were eating these foods, they certainly had a lot of protection. The figs also have medicinal value, used as a purgative for back problems. And we know King Hezekiah used a poultice of figs for the boils that he had. And both the Bible and the Quran extol the virtues of figs. Muhammad states that if there was a fruit descended from paradise, it surely was the fig. So he promoted the use of... Now moving to grapes. Grapes, of course, are very common. And These can be eaten dried in different forms: raisins, currants, sultanas. You can make juice or jam. And the interesting thing that a lot of people know about today is that the red color is associated, this pigment, anthocyanins, very powerful antioxidant. So all the berries, blueberries and other berries, as well as the grapes, are rich in this, and particularly the seeds and the skins, more so than the pulp. And so these are very protective. The grape juice, because of these pigments, protect against cancer, protect against blood clots. They help relax the blood vessels, so blood pressure is regulated, and cholesterol oxidation is managed, so risk of atherosclerosis is diminished. There are a number of compounds there. One that many people who are watching may have heard of is Resveratrol. This is particularly well researched and is protective against a number of tumours. It also promotes apoptosis, which we know is the programmed death of cancer cells. So having a drink of grape juice every day is a good thing, and I'm sure the Israelites were drinking a lot of grape juice. So now we come to the last of these foods that we've talked about, these big 7 that were mentioned in Deuteronomy 8, and this is the pomegranate. And this is found commonly in old tombs and in medical documents of Egypt. So clearly pomegranates were used in herbal medicine, no question about that. And it's recognized in the ancient Near East as a symbol of fertility and is associated with long life, healthy long life. And the flowers and the fruits are embroidered along the edge of the high priest's garment, and the top of the pillars of King Solomon's temple had carved, they were adorned with 200 carved pomegranates. So you couldn't live the daily cycle or the yearly cycle, seeing the temple, seeing occasionally the high priest, and not see. But they grow, the pomegranate tree grows, and it has a beautiful flower, and the fruit is also bright red and colourful, and you can see it. And a number of us believe that it was the pomegranate that the serpent used to seduce Eve, because it means the apple with many seeds. And in the Quran, it's mentioned as being in the Garden of Paradise. And according to Jewish tradition, the perfect pomegranate has 613 seeds, one for every law in the Torah, okay? So if you've ever opened a pomegranate, you'll know that it probably has close to 613. I've never counted them. My wife has challenged me to do that sometime, so maybe one day I will actually sit down, but I usually start eating and forget to count them. Now, there's not many calories, and it's rich in potassium, and it's a good source of a number of vitamins, so it's, again, managing blood pressure. It's fairly good. Pomegranates are also very rich in the antioxidants we've been talking about, and these pigments will help in protecting against cancer, prostate cancer, breast cancer, colon cancer. There's research in the last 10 years that's shown that pomegranate extracts can actually protect people who regularly use these things. A combination of 8 different studies. The final analysis showed that people who drink every day a glass of pomegranate juice, they have a measurable drop in their blood pressure. So as we saw earlier, translates into protection against stroke and cardiovascular disease in general. So that's the 7 foods.
Before you summarize, could I ask you a question?
Sure.
You mentioned kind of in passing the term phytochemicals. Can you define what a phytochemical is?
Sure. Phytochemical, phyto means plant, and chemical is a chemical substance. And usually we think of chemicals in foods as pesticides or something bad, but these are substances that the Creator put in the food. As it grows, they develop, and these are all, you could think of them as like nutrients, because even though they might not protect us against blindness or diminished nerve reaction or help with energy metabolism, they all help in metabolic pathways that are vital in the body that help with promoting health. So regulating blood pressure, regulating heart pumping, regulating cell cycle, regulating blood sugar release, regulating all the things that keep us operating in a healthy fashion. These are all put, and there's over 20,000 of them.
Wow.
And we've only just started in the last few years to examine and understand what their role and function is.
Sounds like another hot health topic.
Well, there's a lot known, and we can summarize now here. Basically, that these foods that we mention in Deuteronomy 8, wheat, barley, figs, grapes, olive oil, pomegranates, and honey from date palm syrup, we've shown that they're all nutritious, but we've also shown, perhaps even more importantly, they're health promoting. So if you're eating these, and we want to be clear, this is not all that they ate, but these were the foods that were highlighted in Deuteronomy 8 that were especially highlighted in the land that they should focus on. So eaten in moderation, they support a healthy lifestyle. So following these things, they had some medicinal value, they had health promoting value, and they were nutritious. And as you know, these foods, even for us today, are yummy. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation to us today on the topic of the ancient Israel Mediterranean style diet.
I just want to thank Dr. Winston Craig for his presentation today, and Dr. Ruth Stanheiser for interviewing him. It's exciting to see just how the Old Testament is tied in with the foods that we eat today. I really love it because God truly is a foodie. In Psalms 34:8, it says, "Taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man who trusts in him." And it's just amazing that God gave us this diet back in the Old Testament, and today science shows the things that he gave us really benefits our body. And so I just want to encourage you viewers, I'm sure you're hungry after watching this, go ahead and take this presentation to heart, practice what you eat, and also live what you eat. There's a saying, eat to live and live to eat. And so I hope you guys can enjoy that quality of life and continue watching and tuning in to Hot Health. And for more information on what we've talked about and for future episodes to come, I want to encourage you to visit our website at www.smartlifestyletv.com.